In the stillness of the early morning, a pale sun crept timidly over the jagged peaks of the mountain range, casting its first light on the military training area. It was a rugged expanse, punctuated by dense clusters of trees and rocky outcrops, designed to test the mettle of any Marine. Despite the inherent challenges, there was a sense of normalcy that came with the routine of our exercises. We were a tight-knit unit, bound by the camaraderie of shared hardship and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Each of us moved with a practiced precision, our boots whispering over the undergrowth, eyes sharp and focused, senses attuned to the smallest shift in our surroundings. Our training regime was grueling, but there was comfort in the familiar rhythm of drills and exercises. We operated under the watchful eye of our commanding officer, a grizzled veteran whose presence was as solid and dependable as the mountains themselves. He led us with a steady hand, his confidence in our abilities bolstering our own. We trusted him implicitly. He seemed as much a part of the landscape as the trees and rocks, an immutable fixture in our world. But even the most well-oiled machinery can falter when faced with the inexplicable. It began subtly, a nagging feeling that something was amiss, barely perceptible beneath the surface of our daily routine. At first, it was easy to dismiss as simple fatigue or the disorientation that comes with prolonged exposure to the wilderness. However, as the days wore on, that feeling of unease burgeoned, weaving itself into the fabric of our training. I first noticed it during a night exercise. The cold air was sharp against my skin, the silence around me profound. The forest seemed to hold its breath, every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig amplified in the darkness. We moved in formation, our thoughts synchronized in the manner that comes only with extensive training. But then there was a moment, a pause in my thoughts, a fleeting sense of being watched. It was a sensation that curled at the edges of my consciousness, elusive and unsettling. I glanced around, scanning the shadowy outlines of trees, but found nothing out of place. Still, the feeling lingered, refusing to be banished by reason. The next morning, I brushed off the night's peculiarities, attributing them to an overactive imagination. The sun had returned, bringing with it the straightforward clarity of daylight. Yet, as we continued with our drills, the sense of being observed returned, more insistent this time. I wasn't alone in my unease. Whispers began to circulate among my fellow Marines, murmurs of an unseen presence shadowing our movements. We laughed it off at first, masking our discomfort with bravado. After all, we were Marines, hardened and unshakable. Yet, the laughter held a brittle edge, a shared understanding that beneath our deflection lay genuine apprehension. The forests around us, once familiar and welcoming in their wild beauty, now seemed to close in, their shadows stretching longer, darker. It was as though the very air had thickened, pregnant with anticipation. Like the calm before a storm, it was a stillness that vibrated with tension, as if the world around us teetered on the brink of some profound revelation. Our commanding officer, ever perceptive, noticed the shift in morale. He gathered us one evening, his voice calm, authoritative. He dismissed the rumors with a pragmatic ease, reminding us of the importance of focus and discipline. His words were grounding, a tether to reality, yet they did little to dispel the sense of unease that had settled over us like a shroud. Days stretched into weeks, each one marked by an intensifying sense of disquiet. There were more instances of odd occurrences: a snapped twig where no one had walked, an overturned rock with no explanation. The forest seemed alive with whispers, a chorus of voices just beyond comprehension. We were soldiers, trained to analyze, to react. Yet these phenomena defied logic. It was as if the mountain itself was alive, aware, and watching our every move. Then one night, the tension reached its zenith. A storm had swept in, cloaking the mountains in a tumult of wind and rain. We huddled in our tents, the fabric flapping violently, the sound as relentless as any battlefield. Sleep was elusive, each gust of wind a reminder of our vulnerability in the face of nature's fury. It was in this chaotic symphony that the inexplicable revealed itself. A piercing scream cut through the night, a sound so raw and primal it seemed to tear the very fabric of reality. We scrambled to our feet, adrenaline surging as we rushed towards the source. The rain lashed against our faces, limiting visibility to mere feet ahead. We moved as one, a unit driven by instinct and duty, yet at the heart of it all was a gnawing fear, an understanding that this was no ordinary call to arms. We found him at the edge of the forest, our fellow Marine, eyes wide with terror, his body trembling despite the cold. "Something out there," he gasped, his voice a fragile thread. "Something's watching us." His assertion, though lacking any physical evidence, was a confirmation of our collective dread. The forest around us felt alive, each tree a sentinel, watching, waiting. Our commanding officer ordered a search, his voice steady, authoritative. We moved through the trees in pairs, the beams of our flashlights cutting through the darkness. There was an unspoken agreement among us. No one wanted to be alone. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows and hidden paths, each step an invitation to the unknown. As we searched, the storm abated, leaving in its wake a profound silence. It was as though the very air held its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. In that silence, I felt it again, that sensation of being watched, a gaze that seemed to pierce through the layers of night. I turned, flashlight slicing through the dark, but saw nothing. Yet the feeling persisted, an itch at the back of my mind. We regrouped at dawn, exhausted and unnerved. Our commanding officer called off the search, citing the storm as the cause of our comrades' panic. His rational explanation fell flat, a thin veneer over the inexplicable. Despite our training, our experience, there was no denying the sense of being hunted, of something lurking just beyond our comprehension. In the days that followed, the unease clung to us like a shadow. Our training continued, but the forest was no longer a place of challenge and growth. It had become a realm of hidden threats, an entity unto itself. We were still Marines, bound by duty and loyalty, yet there was a fracture in our resolve, a crack through which doubt seeped. The nights were the hardest. each one stretching into an eternity of darkness and whispered fears. The sensation of being watched, of something unseen lurking at the periphery of vision, became a constant companion. It was during one of these nights that I found myself standing alone at the edge of the camp, staring into the abyss of trees. The air was still, the silence complete. Yet within that silence was a presence, an awareness that was not my own. It was as though the forest itself whispered secrets in a language I could not understand. There, on the edge of the known and the unknown, I felt a profound connection to something ancient, something beyond the grasp of human understanding. It was a moment of clarity, a glimpse into the unfathomable depths of the universe. As I turned away, a movement caught my eye, a shadow slipping silently between the trees. There was no sound, no evidence of its existence, yet I knew it was there, watching, waiting. A chill ran through me, a reminder of our vulnerability in the face of the unknown. We completed our training and returned to base, yet the experience in the mountains lingered. It was a stain on the fabric of our reality, a reminder that even in this age of reason, there are forces beyond our comprehension. We spoke of it rarely, our words tinged with the understanding that some mysteries are best left unexplored. There was a change in us, a wariness that had not been there before. We had faced something in those mountains, a presence that defied explanation. It had watched us, studied us, and in doing so, had left an indelible mark on our souls. We were Marines, forged in the crucible of discipline and duty, yet we had encountered something that transcended the physical, something that whispered of worlds beyond our own. As I sit and reflect on those days, I am filled with a sense of awe and trepidation. The mountains, with their towering peaks and ancient forests, hold secrets that will remain forever hidden, mysteries that linger on the edge of human understanding. We had brushed against the veil of the supernatural, and in doing so, had glimpsed the infinite possibilities that lie beyond. The experience was a testament to the fragility of our perceptions, a reminder that the universe is vast and unknowable, full of wonders and horrors that defy explanation. We had been watched, stalked by a presence unseen, and though we emerged unscathed, the encounter left an indelible mark, a lingering fear that whispers at the edge of consciousness, a reminder of our place in the grand tapestry of existence. Whatever watched us in those mountains, it remains there still, a guardian of secrets and shadows, an unseen stalker in the realm of the unknown. Being a Marine, stationed at Bridgeport in the shadow of the Sierra Nevada, had always been a mixture of serenity and toughness. The rugged terrain and the crisp, biting air demanded respect from anyone trying to master it. Days often drifted into each other, with exercises blending seamlessly into the monotony of discipline and routine. But the mountains and the forest, they were ever present, a mysterious backdrop, as beautiful as they were ominous. The training ground, tucked away in the national forest north of Yosemite, felt both ancient and eternal. It was a place of natural wonder, where the trees stood like old sentinels, whispering secrets of the earth. I often found solace in the solitude, a quiet corner of the world where man was but a guest. My comrades and I shared stories around our campfires at night, while the stars speckled the sky like silver dust. Yet, as familiar as it all felt, the wilderness held a strange, almost sentient quality, as if something unseen lurked just beyond the line of sight, watching. I had always been level-headed, measured in my thoughts and actions. But that year, the fall chill brought with it something unsettling. It started with small things, shadows flickering at the edge of my vision, the rustle of leaves with no wind to stir them, and the pervasive feeling of being observed. As a Marine, I've been trained to notice details, to be alert, so I dismissed these incidents as tricks of the mind, exhausted from rigorous training. However, things shifted one evening during a routine night exercise. We were tasked with navigating the dense forest under the cloak of darkness. The night was particularly cold, the air sharp with the scent of pine and frost. As I moved silently through the underbrush, the beam from my flashlight cut through the blackness, illuminating slices of forest floor, branches looming like skeletal fingers, reaching out. We were supposed to regroup at a clearing beyond a narrow stream, but as I approached it, I felt the ground soften beneath my boots, the terrain subtly shifting. I paused, listening intently. The usual forest sounds were absent. No chirping of crickets, no rustle of nocturnal creatures. All was eerily silent, except for the distant echo of my fellow Marines calling out to each other. It was then I saw it, a figure, just beyond the clearing. At first, I thought it was one of our team, but as I drew closer, I realized it stood unnaturally still. The outline blurred as if the night itself was trying to swallow it whole. I called out, but received no reply. As my flashlight fell upon it, the beam seemed to bend, as if reluctant to reveal whatever it was that stood before me. It was so bizarre, so unreal, that I felt a cold tingle run down my spine. In that moment, I chalked it up to fatigue and pressed on, dismissing it as another misinterpretation of shadows. Returning to camp, I mentioned my experience to my buddy, Carter. He shrugged it off with a nervous chuckle, offering the typical Marine bravado to mask what I sensed was his own unease. "Just a trick of the light," he said, but his eyes betrayed him, darting to the forest edge where the moonlight danced uneasily across the treetops. Days passed, each feeling heavier than the last. The forest seemed to close in around us, as if it were alive, its breath cold against our skin. The unease became palpable among the men, whispered concerns growing louder in the stillness of the night. Some swore they heard voices carried on the wind, soft, indistinct, like a conversation one couldn't quite catch. Others claimed to have seen movements between the trees, figures that vanished when looked at directly. Then came the night that shattered the fragile calm. We were gathered around a fire, the flames crackling as they consumed the dry wood. The air was still, the smoke rising in a lazy spiral toward the star-strewn sky. Suddenly, the fire flickered violently, as if caught by a sudden gust, and then extinguished completely, plunging us into darkness. Startled, we all reached for our flashlights, illuminating each other's faces, pale and tense. It was then we heard it, a sound unlike any I had ever heard before. It was a low, mournful wail, echoing through the trees, weaving through the air with an unsettling familiarity. It was as if the mountains themselves were crying out, a sound so profoundly sorrowful that it seemed to resonate deep within, touching something primal, something ancient. We were all on edge, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. But the darkness was absolute, an encroaching void that felt tangible. As the wailing subsided, replaced by a deafening silence, I felt the grip of fear tighten around my chest. It was then that Carter, who had been standing to my right, shone his light towards the forest's edge and froze. His face turned ashen, eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. Following his gaze, I saw them too, figures standing just beyond the reach of our lights. They were indistinct, shrouded in shadow, their forms flickering as if not entirely part of this world. We couldn't make out faces, only the suggestion of features, like reflections on dark water. They stood there, unmoving, watching us with an intensity that was palpable. Panic surged through the group, instincts honed by training taking over. We backed away, forming a defensive circle, weapons raised, flashlights sweeping the perimeter. But the figures did not retreat, nor did they advance. They simply remained, their presence weighing heavily upon us. After what felt like an eternity, they began to fade, retreating into the forest as silently as they had appeared. We remained on high alert, adrenaline coursing through us. But the night remained still, as if holding its breath. In the days that followed, the forest seemed to close around us even tighter. Training sessions felt different, the sense of unease now an unshakable companion. We were not alone, of that I was certain. The atmosphere was oppressive, filled with an unspoken dread that gnawed at the edges of our sanity. I found myself drawn back to the clearing where I first saw the figure. It was daylight, the sun's rays streaming through the canopy, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. Yet even in the light, the clearing felt wrong, as if it were a place out of time, disconnected from the world around it. I stood there, trying to piece together the fragments of my fear, seeking an explanation that eluded me. The rational part of my mind grappled with the irrationality of it all, the impossibility of what we had witnessed. But the forest, with its ancient trees and whispered secrets, offered no answers. As I turned to leave, a breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the faintest echo of that mournful wail. It was a sound etched into my memory, a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be unraveled. Our tour at Bridgeport ended soon after, but the experience lingered, a shadow that followed me long after I left the mountains behind. I find myself reflecting on it often, especially on quiet nights when the world is hushed and still. The forest remains, unchanged and eternal, and I can't help but wonder if those figures still watch from the shadows, their mournful cries echoing through the trees. Perhaps it was all a figment of our imaginations, a collective hallucination. born of isolation and stress. But deep down, I know that what we experienced was real, a brush with something beyond our understanding. To this day, I carry the memory with me, a reminder of the mysterious and unknowable depths of the world. It's a story I've shared with few, uncertain of how it would be received. But for those of us who were there, it's a bond we share, a truth we carry, as haunting and beautiful as the forest itself. I have always felt a strange affinity with the forest, a bond that seems to extend beyond the natural connection one feels with the serenity of nature. As a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service, the dense woods of Oregon have been my second home for over a decade. My team and I often venture into the vast wilderness to locate and rescue the lost, the injured, and sometimes those who never wanted to be found. Over the years, I've encountered things I can scarcely explain, events that defy the natural order and hint at something lurking just beyond the veil of what we consider reality. The Oregon forests have their fair share of legends and folklore, stories passed down through generations about creatures that slip through the shadows and voices that call from unseen places. Initially, I dismissed these as mere tales, stories to scare children around campfires. But soon, experiences began to weave themselves into my reality, and ignoring them became impossible. It started with subtle whispers, sounds barely audible over the rustling leaves and the distant calls of wildlife. I was often alone during routine patrols, my footsteps cushioned by the mossy undergrowth, the air crisp and tinged with pine. It was during one of these solitary walks that I first heard it, a faint murmur, as if someone were trying to speak just beyond the threshold of my comprehension. I paused, instinctively holding my breath, straining my ears to catch the words. But as quickly as it had begun, the whispering ceased, leaving only the gentle sighing of the wind through the trees. I dismissed it, attributing it to fatigue or the natural sounds of the forest. Yet, a part of me was unsettled, a quiet unease that settled in the pit of my stomach and refused to dissipate. Over the following weeks, the whispers became more frequent, more distinct, though still incomprehensible. I attempted to rationalize them, but a gnawing thought persisted. I was not alone. A more tangible disturbance occurred during a particularly challenging search operation. A young woman had vanished while hiking with friends. They had set out on a popular trail, but she decided to take a detour, ostensibly to photograph a secluded waterfall she'd read about online. The group expected her to rejoin them within the hour, but she never returned. As the day turned to night and she remained missing, we were called in. The search was arduous, the forest growing sinister as twilight descended. Shadows lengthened, and the trees seemed to close in, creating a labyrinthine maze of branches and undergrowth. I was paired with a fellow officer, Karen, and together we combed the area where the woman was last seen. As we moved deeper into the woods, the whispers returned. Karen heard them too, her eyes widening as she glanced at me in alarm. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm not sure," I replied, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "It might just be the wind." But we both knew it sounded like voices, multiple, indistinct, as if a group were conversing on the periphery of our hearing. A sudden rustling to our right drew our attention, and we turned as one, flashlights cutting through the gloom. A figure emerged, stumbling towards us with an unsteady gait. It was the missing woman, her clothes torn, and her face a mask of terror. "Help me," she gasped, collapsing at our feet. We rushed to her aid, radioing in her location and condition. As we waited for assistance, she clung to us, her eyes darting nervously towards the forest. "They were calling me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I heard them in the trees." "Who?" Karen asked gently. "I don't know," the woman replied. "Voices. They wanted me to follow." When the rescue team arrived, the woman was taken to safety, and an investigation into her disappearance ensued. Yet, no logical explanation surfaced, and her account of the voices was dismissed as delirium. After that incident, I began to notice other peculiarities. Animals behaving erratically, vanishing without a trace, and tracks that led nowhere. Most unnerving were the times I returned to a location, only to find it altered, as if the forest had shifted subtly in my absence. The escalation came during another search, this time for a seasoned hiker, known for his extensive knowledge of the area. He had gone missing on a trail that wound through particularly dense woodland, a place where sunlight struggled to penetrate even at midday. Something about this case felt different, ominous. As my team delved into the woods, the forest seemed to close around us, an oppressive presence that set our nerves on edge. The whispers, now a constant companion, grew louder, more insistent. It felt as though we were being watched, the sensation prickling at the back of my neck. We found the hiker 3 days later, or rather, what was left of him. He lay in a small clearing, his backpack beside him, untouched. His expression was one of serene acceptance, almost as if he'd chosen this place as his final resting spot. There were no signs of struggle, no indications of an animal attack or natural causes of death. It was as if life had simply departed him. That night, as we sat around the campfire, the team was subdued, exchanging uneasy glances. The forest was too quiet, the usual night sounds absent, replaced by an oppressive silence. Then, from the darkness, came the whispers surrounding us, pressing in from all sides. The climax occurred when one of our newer recruits, Daniel, stood abruptly and began walking towards the trees, his movements deliberate and trance-like. We called after him, but he didn't respond, his eyes fixed on something unseen. Karen and I were the first to reach him, grabbing his arms and shaking him from his stupor. He blinked, confusion clouding his features. "What happened?" he asked, his voice shaky. "You were walking into the forest," I replied, my own voice barely steady. "Why?" "I don't know," he said. "I just felt drawn." We returned to base camp, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken fears. None of us slept that night, the whispers a constant, maddening presence. In the ensuing days, we completed the investigation into the hiker's death, but the findings were inconclusive. Officially, the cause remained unknown, but unofficially, we all felt a deep, inexplicable conviction that something unnatural resided in that forest, a force beyond our understanding. The lingering fear has stayed with me, a shadow that follows even in the light of day. I continue my work, patrolling the vast woods and assisting those in need. But there's a part of me that remains on edge, attuned to the subtle shifts and sounds that should not be. The whispers no longer surprise me. They are as much a part of the forest as the rustling leaves and the call of distant birds. I have learned to coexist with them, to accept that there are things beyond my comprehension, and that sometimes the forest does not want us to find those who wander into its depths. There are still nights when I awake in a cold sweat, the whispers echoing in my mind, a reminder that the woods hold secrets that are not meant to be uncovered. And so, I remain vigilant, ever watchful, knowing that one day the forest may call me too. Until then, I walk its paths, ever mindful of the whispers and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart of Oregon's vast, enigmatic wilderness. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple as I finished setting up camp in one of the remote corners of the unnamed national park. The park was known for its untouched wilderness, a sprawling expanse of dense forest and rugged terrain that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The solitude was intoxicating, a chance to escape the cacophony of everyday life. Here, I found solace beneath the towering canopy, where the whispers of leaves in the breeze were the only sounds to break the silence. As night descended, the forest transformed into a world of shadows and muted sounds. The campfire crackled softly, casting an amber glow that brushed against the encroaching darkness. I settled into my chair, a book resting in my lap, feeling the weight of a peaceful fatigue that came from a day spent hiking along untamed trails. The park was my haven, a place where I could lose myself and perhaps, in the process, find something forgotten within. The tranquility was unexpectedly interrupted by the crunch of footsteps on the underbrush. I glanced up, squinting into the dim light to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a park ranger, his uniform distinct even in the failing light. He approached with a purposeful stride, though there was an odd hesitance in his posture. "Evening," he greeted, his voice a low murmur that blended with the rustling leaves. "Evening," I replied, curious but not alarmed. Rangers often patrolled these areas, ensuring campers adhered to park rules. The ranger paused just outside the ring of firelight, his face partially obscured by the brim of his hat. "Planning to stay all night?" I nodded. "Of course. Is there a problem?" He hesitated, then stepped forward, his eyes catching the firelight with a strange intensity. "There's been unusual activity in these parts. It's probably nothing, but I'd advise caution. Stick close to your camp." I felt a ripple of unease at his vague warning. What kind of activity? Strange noises, odd tracks. Could be a bear or something else. Just keep your wits about you. His words lingered in the cool night air, and I found myself scrutinizing his features for any hint of jest. But his expression was earnest, almost pleading. With a slight nod, he turned and disappeared back into the night, leaving me with a sense of disquiet that clung like a shadow. I returned to my book, though my attention was fragmented, my mind wandering to the ranger's words. The forest, once a bastion of serenity, now seemed to harbor unseen eyes, watching from the blackness beyond. The wind rustled through the trees, a gentle but ominous whisper that set my nerves on edge. As the hours passed, the fire burned lower, its warmth a welcome comfort against the creeping chill. I stoked the embers, feeding them fresh kindling, while my thoughts drifted through the ranger's warning. I chastised myself for allowing superstition to take root. After all, the wilderness was inherently mysterious, a living tapestry of life and death, known and unknown. Yet, the undeniable feeling of being watched persisted, a prickling sensation at the nape of my neck. I shook it off, unsure whether it was the ranger's words that had unsettled me, or some instinct chiming from within. The night wore on, and sleep began to pull me under. I retreated to my tent, leaving the fire to smolder. Within the cocoon of my sleeping bag, I listened to the symphony of nocturnal life, each sound amplified in the darkness. I drifted toward slumber, comforted by the rhythmic chorus. The first disturbance came in the hush between dreams and consciousness, a distant echo that wormed its way into my half-asleep mind. It was a sound that didn't belong, an irregularity amid the forest's natural cadence, a low, resonant growl that sent a shiver down my spine. I lay still, straining to discern whether it was real or imagined, a trick of a dream lingering on the edges of wakefulness. The growl sounded again, closer this time, unmistakably real. I sat up, heart pounding, the fabric of the tent a flimsy barrier between me and the unseen threat. My mind raced, cataloging possibilities, a bear, a mountain lion, or perhaps something else entirely. The night was still, the earlier rustlings of small creatures absent, as if the forest held its breath in anticipation. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness with a stark intensity that seemed to deepen the shadows beyond its reach. I unzipped the tent cautiously, stepping into the night air, my breath a mist in the cold. The fire had died to glowing embers, casting a faint illumination that barely penetrated the surrounding gloom. I scanned the perimeter, the flashlight sweeping over trees and underbrush, revealing nothing but the natural chaos of the forest floor. The growl came again, this time from behind, sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through me. I swung the light around, the beam slicing through the dark, but there was nothing. No creature, no movement, only the silent trees standing sentinel in the night. I backed toward the remains of the fire, my senses heightened, every rustle and creak a potential threat. Rational thought struggled against the primal urge to flee, to abandon the camp and seek safety in numbers, in civilization. But something held me there, a stubborn refusal to surrender to fear, to the unseen menace lurking in the dark. As minutes stretched into an eternity, the growling ceased, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. I remained vigilant, the flashlight gripped tightly in one hand, the other hovering near a makeshift weapon, a branch whittled to a point, more a comfort than a genuine means of defense. The forest, as if sensing my resolve, began to stir once more, the night creatures cautiously resuming their nightly routines. I remained tense, every sound a reminder of the unseen presence, but gradually, the tension in my muscles eased, and I returned to the tent, though I left the flap open, the flashlight ready at my side. Sleep came fitfully, broken by the slightest of sounds, each one jerking me back to a hyper-aware state. The unknown threat lingered at the edges of my consciousness, a shadow in the recesses of my mind, refusing to be dismissed. With the dawn came a semblance of safety, the light chasing away the phantoms of the night. I emerged from the tent, blinking against the morning sun, the events of the night lingering like a half-remembered dream. The forest, bathed in gentle morning light, appeared unchanged, the terror of the night seeming almost absurd in the clarity of day. Determined to uncover the source of the disturbance, I set off on a circular path around the camp, searching for signs, tracks, scat, anything to explain the growling. The underbrush was dense, leaves and twigs crunching underfoot, but I was methodical, retracing my steps with care. I found nothing unusual, no signs of a large predator, no disturbances in the natural order. It was as if the night had drawn a veil over its secrets, leaving only questions in its wake. The memory of the ranger's warning resurfaced, and I made the decision to hike back towards the park's main trails, hoping to encounter him again, to seek clarity, perhaps reassurance. As I packed, the forest seemed to watch with an indifferent gaze, the trees whispering among themselves in a language I could not comprehend. The journey back was uneventful, the morning sun warming the chill from my bones. The park, vast and sprawling, felt less intimidating in the light, the path clear and reassuring. Yet, the ranger's words weighed heavily on my mind, his urgency now more pressing than ever. I reached the ranger station by mid-afternoon, its weathered facade a welcome sight. The ranger was there, standing on the porch, his gaze thoughtful as he surveyed the horizon. He turned as I approached, his expression unreadable. "Back so soon?" he asked, though there was no surprise in his voice. I nodded, recounting the events of the previous night, the growling, the pervasive sense of being watched. He listened intently, his eyes narrowing slightly as I spoke. "It happens," he said finally, his tone guarded. "This place, it has a way of unsettling folks, plays tricks." "But it felt real," I protested, frustration creeping in at his seeming dismissiveness. He held my gaze, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his features. Sometimes, the park reveals things best left unseen, things the mind struggles to grasp. His words, cryptic and unsettling, did little to ease my concerns. "What do you mean?" I pressed. He hesitated, glancing around as if ensuring no one else could hear. "There are stories, rumors, things that don't fit the natural order, things that have been covered up for years." "A conspiracy?" I asked, incredulous but intrigued. "Maybe," he admitted, "or maybe just the wilderness asserting itself. Either way, it's best not to dig too deep." His warning hung in the air, an unspoken challenge to leave the mysteries unchallenged. I considered his words, the implications of secrets buried in the wilds, hidden by those who sought to maintain order, control. I thanked him, though my mind was far from settled. As I turned to leave, he called after me, his voice carrying a hint of genuine concern. Remember, not everything out there is meant for us to understand. I left the station, the ranger's warning echoing in my mind. The park, with its vast expanse and hidden truths, loomed ominously behind me, a place of beauty and terror intertwined. As I made my way back to civilization, the mundane sounds of life, cars, voices, the hum of modernity, felt both foreign and comforting. Yet, the memory of the night lingered, a shadow that refused to dissipate, a reminder of the unexplained, the unknown. Even now, far from the park's borders, I find myself glancing into the shadows, half expecting to see a flicker of movement, to hear a growl that defies logic. The ranger's words, a calm yet eerie warning, continue to haunt my thoughts. The wilderness holds its secrets close, a silent guardian of mysteries that defy comprehension. And though I have left those woods behind, the fear remains, a lingering presence in the quiet moments, a whisper in the dark, a reminder that some things are best left undisturbed. The sun had barely graced the horizon when I parked my rust-ridden truck at the foot of the Appalachian Mountains. The dense forest stood shrouded in a light mist, the trees tall and ancient, as if they whispered secrets amongst themselves. I had been a cell tower technician for over a decade, my job often leading me to isolated locales, where the only company I had was the hum of the wind and the occasional curious animal. It was a life of solitude, but one I reveled in. The quiet, the predictability, the escape from a world too loud and intrusive. Today's task was a routine maintenance check on a cell tower nestled deep within the Appalachian Range, a solitary giant standing watch over a sea of green. It was a familiar trek, having serviced this particular tower multiple times. With my gear slung over my shoulder and the morning's cool air invigorating my senses, I began the ascent through the well-worn path that snaked its way up the mountainside. As I climbed, I couldn't help but admire the serene beauty around me. The leaves rustled gently in the wind, birds chirped their morning songs, and the forest floor crackled underfoot. The world was alive, yet peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos I imagined lingered in more populated regions. There was comfort in the isolation, an escape from the humdrum of daily life. But as I approached the tower, a peculiar sensation prickled at the edge of my awareness. It was subtle at first, like the faintest echo of an unsettling thought. Dismissed it as nothing more than an overactive imagination, a byproduct of too many solitary hours spent amid the wilderness. I focused instead on my task, eager to complete the maintenance and return to the comfort of my truck before the sun reached its zenith. The tower loomed above me, its metallic structure stark against the morning sky. I climbed the ladder with practiced ease, the height no longer a source of anxiety, but a familiar, almost comforting challenge. Once at the top, I surveyed the surrounding landscape, an endless expanse of forest stretching far beyond the horizon. The tranquility of the scene was mesmerizing, and for a moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. That peace was shattered when I heard it. A low, guttural sound, barely audible but distinct against the natural symphony of the forest. It came from somewhere below, perhaps the base of the tower. My heart skipped a beat, the sound foreign yet oddly familiar, as if dredged up from a forgotten nightmare. I shook my head, attributing the noise to a trick of the wind or the groan of an aging metal structure. With renewed focus, I set about my work, inspecting the cables and equipment with meticulous attention. Yet, the feeling that something was amiss persisted, an unseen presence lurking just beyond the periphery of my vision. I told myself it was nothing, that the mind often conjures shadows where none exist. But the forest, usually so inviting, seemed to close in around me, the trees no longer welcoming sentinels, but watchful observers of some unseen drama. The job progressed smoothly, despite the nagging unease, and soon I was ready to descend. As I began my descent, the sound came again, clearer this time, as if whatever produced it had drawn closer. It was a deep, resonant growl, far too rich and complex to be attributed to any known animal. I paused, my grip tightening on the ladder, eyes scanning the area below for any sign of movement. But the forest betrayed nothing, its secrets concealed beneath a canopy of leaves and shadow. I reached the ground with a mix of relief and apprehension, the sensation of being watched more pronounced than ever. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to retreat to the safety of my truck, and forget this strange encounter. But curiosity, that insatiable drive that often leads men to their doom, compelled me to investigate. I circled the tower, my senses on high alert, eyes probing the underbrush for any sign of life. The forest was eerily silent, the usual cacophony of nature replaced by an oppressive stillness. It was then that I saw it, a footprint, large and distinctly inhuman, pressed deep into the earth. The sight sent a shiver down my spine, the implications of such a discovery disconcerting at best. My mind raced, cycling through a list of possibilities, each more improbable than the last. Was it some prank, a fabricated evidence left behind by an overzealous camper? Or perhaps a bear, though the size and shape of the print seemed all wrong for such an explanation. As I pondered, the forest remained silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for me to piece together the puzzle it had laid before me. The feeling of being watched intensified, and with it, an overwhelming urge to flee. The primal part of my brain, attuned to the dangers of the wild, urged me to abandon my quest for answers and retreat to the safety of civilization. But I resisted, driven by a need to understand the mystery that had ensnared me. As I turned to head back to my truck, the growl sounded once more, closer and more menacing than before. My pulse quickened, adrenaline flooding my veins as I scanned the surrounding forest for any hint of movement. It was then that I saw it, a shape, massive and indistinct, moving through the trees with an unnerving grace. It was a creature unlike any I had ever seen, its form hidden in shadow, yet undeniably present. The air around it seemed to shimmer, as if the very fabric of reality wavered in its presence. My mind struggled to comprehend the sight, a primal fear taking root in my gut as I realized the enormity of what I faced. Suddenly, all thoughts of curiosity vanished, replaced by an overwhelming instinct to survive. I turned and ran, the forest a blur as I navigated the familiar path with newfound urgency. The sound of pursuit, though subtle, was unmistakable, a haunting resonance that echoed through the trees. My truck came into view, a beacon of safety amidst the chaos. I reached it breathless and trembling, fumbling with the keys in my haste to escape. As the engine roared to life, I dared a glance back, half expecting to see the creature emerge from the shadows. But there was nothing, only the silent forest, its secrets once again concealed beneath a veil of tranquility. I drove away, the road winding through the mountains, as I put distance between myself and the inexplicable terror I had encountered. Yet, even as the miles stretched out before me, the fear lingered, a constant reminder of the unknown lurking in the wilds. For days after, I found myself haunted by the memory of the creature, the sound of its growl reverberating in my mind like a ghostly refrain. Sleep was elusive, my dreams plagued by visions of shadowy forms and primal fears. I tried to rationalize the experience, to attribute it to exhaustion or an overactive imagination. But the evidence, the footprint, the undeniable presence, refused to be dismissed. I spoke to no one of what I had seen, the fear of disbelief and ridicule silencing my tongue. Instead, I returned to my routine, visiting sites and repairing towers with the same diligence as before. Yet, the forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth of hidden dangers, each rustling leaf or distant call a potential harbinger of the unknown. As time passed, the immediacy of the encounter began to fade, but the sense of unease remained. It was as if the creature, whatever it was, had left an indelible mark on my soul, a reminder of the mysteries that lay beyond the veil of human understanding. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even in the crowded streets of the city or the solitude of my home. The encounter had awakened something within me, a realization that the world was far more complex and terrifying than I had ever imagined. The boundaries between reality and nightmare had blurred, leaving me with a lingering fear that perhaps one day I would hear that growl again, echoing through the shadows of my mind. The Appalachian Mountains had always been a place of mystery, their ancient peaks and hidden valleys home to countless legends and whispered tales. I had always dismissed such stories, attributing them to the imaginations of those who sought to explain the unexplainable. But now, having faced the unknown, I understood the truth behind the legends, that some mysteries were never meant to be uncovered, and some secrets were best left undisturbed. As I continued my work, the memory of the encounter remained with me, a chilling reminder of the fragility of my understanding of the world. The forest, with its towering trees and shadowed paths, had become a place of both beauty and dread, its secrets forever entwined with my own. And in the quiet moments, when the world seemed to hold its breath and silence reigned supreme, I listened for the growl, waiting for the return of the creature that had forever altered my perception of reality. The countryside around our old farmhouse was idyllic, a picturesque canvas painted with the hues of tranquility and nostalgia. I had always found solace in the rhythm of rural life, the way the sun crept over the horizon each morning, casting golden light over the dew-laden fields, and the way it dipped below the edge of the world every evening, leaving behind a tapestry of stars. It was this serenity that had drawn me to live there, away from the chaos of the city. My life had slipped into a comfortable routine, each day a mirror of the last, punctuated only by the changing seasons and the occasional visit from a neighbor. The farmhouse itself was a relic from another time, its wood aged and weathered, but steadfast against the relentless passage of years. I had grown fond of its creaky floors, and the way the wind whispered through its cracks, a lullaby that accompanied my nights. The land stretched far and wide, bordered by dense woods that stood like silent sentinels, their secrets hidden in shadows. I often roamed these woods, navigating the labyrinth of trees and underbrush, a habit that had become second nature to me. It was during one of these familiar walks that I first noticed something amiss. The air felt different, charged with an undercurrent that I couldn't quite place. The forest, usually alive with the chatter of birds and the rustle of leaves, seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to happen. I shrugged it off, attributing my unease to the shifting weather that often heralded the coming of autumn. Yet, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, a prickling sensation at the nape of my neck that lingered even after I returned home. The following days were marked by a series of disturbances, subtle at first, but increasingly difficult to ignore. I began to notice tracks in the mud near the edge of the woods, large and misshapen, like nothing I had ever seen before. They seemed to lead nowhere, disappearing as abruptly as they appeared. At night, I heard strange noises, low and guttural, echoing through the stillness. Each time I heard them, I'd rise from my bed and peer out into the night, my heart pounding in my chest. But the darkness revealed nothing. My dreams became vivid and unsettling, populated by shadowy figures and a sense of impending doom that clung to me long after I woke. I found myself growing anxious, my once peaceful sanctuary tainted by an invisible menace. I tried to maintain my routines, hoping that familiarity would dispel the unease, but the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of my mind like a relentless tide. It was on an especially crisp October evening that the situation escalated. The sun had set, leaving the sky a deep indigo, strewn with stars that flickered like distant flames. I had decided to take a walk, hoping the cool air would clear my mind. As I ventured into the woods, the atmosphere felt different, a heavy silence settling around me like a shroud. My footsteps seemed unnaturally loud, the crunch of leaves underfoot echoing in the stillness. As I moved deeper into the woods, a sound stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a low, mournful bellow, unlike anything I had ever heard. It reverberated through the trees, sending a shiver down my spine. I tried to rationalize it, Perhaps a moose, I thought, although I had never seen one so close to the farmhouse. My curiosity piqued. I followed the sound, my heart hammering against my ribs. What I saw next defied all logic and understanding. In a small clearing, illuminated by the pale moonlight, stood a creature that was both familiar and alien. It was indeed a moose, or it would have been if not for its grotesque proportions and unsettling aura. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, intelligent and malevolent, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Its antlers were massive, branching out like twisted hands reaching up to the sky, and its body was impossibly large, casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the ground beneath it. I stood frozen, caught between the instinct to flee and the compulsion to understand what I was witnessing. The creature let out another bellow, the sound vibrating through my very bones, and I knew then that I was in the presence of something beyond the natural order, something ancient and powerful. Panic surged through me, breaking my paralysis, and I turned to run, the forest blurring around me as I stumbled my way back to the farmhouse. Back within the safety of my home, I bolted the doors and windows, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind reeled with the impossibility of what I had seen, yet the memory of those glowing eyes and that haunting call lingered, a persistent reminder that whatever it was real. I spent the night in fitful sleep, the creature's image haunting my dreams, whispering secrets from the dark corners of my subconscious. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. I could feel its presence, always just beyond the threshold of my awareness, watching and waiting. The once comforting woods now felt oppressive, the trees closing in like an ominous canopy. I avoided them, sticking close to the farmhouse, but the sense of being hunted remained. Occasionally, I would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of shadow, a rustle in the underbrush. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. I tried to speak of it to the few neighbors I had, hoping for some confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. They listened politely, nodding along with skepticism thinly veiled behind sympathetic smiles. One elderly man, a local fixture whose wisdom was often sought, merely nodded knowingly and muttered something about the old spirits of the land, warning me to tread carefully in places where the veil between worlds was thin. The climax came one cold, blustery night when the wind howled like a living thing outside my window. I was awoken by a sound, a tapping, insistent and rhythmic, at the glass. With a sense of dread pooling in my stomach, I got up and approached the window. What I saw made my blood run cold. The creature stood just beyond the glass, its eyes glowing like twin flames in the darkness. It was closer than it had ever been, its form towering over the house, the antlers scraping against the eaves. The tapping came from its massive hooves, each strike deliberate and menacing. It seemed to be studying me, those infernal eyes locking onto mine, and I felt an overwhelming sense of vulnerability, as if it could see into the depths of my soul. I stumbled back, my mind racing for a solution, a way to banish this nightmare. In a moment of desperation, I remembered the words of the old man, his mention of the thin veil. Perhaps, I thought, there was a way to send it back to wherever it had come from. I scrambled for my phone, seeking any information on rituals or lore that might help. Hours passed as I researched, the creature's presence never wavering, its eyes a constant, unyielding pressure. Finally, I stumbled upon an old folk tale, a story of an ancient guardian of the forest, a creature feared and revered by those who once walked these lands. To appease it, to send it back to its realm, one needed to acknowledge its dominion with a gift, a token of respect. With trembling hands, I gathered what I could find, a small charm that had belonged to my grandmother, an offering of personal significance. I approached the window again, the creature watching my every move. Slowly, I opened the door and stepped out into the night, the cold biting into my skin. The creature remained still, observing. I placed the charm on the ground, near its hooves, and stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grace that seemed at odds with its massive form, the creature lowered its head, touching the charm with its nose. It paused, then raised its head, the glow in its eyes softening, and I felt an inexplicable sense of peace wash over me. The creature turned slowly and retreated into the woods, its form merging with the shadows until it disappeared completely. I stood there, breathless and bewildered, the night returning to its usual stillness. The sense of menace lifted, and for the first time in weeks, I felt truly alone in the best possible way. Yet, even as normalcy returned, the events of those weeks lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that lay just beyond the edge of understanding. The woods, though no longer threatening, held a different kind of respect from me. I knew now that the world was far stranger and more wondrous than I had ever imagined. The farmhouse, my sanctuary, was once again a place of comfort, but the experience had left an indelible mark. I often found myself standing at the edge of the woods, eyes scanning the tree line, half expecting to see a flicker of movement, a reminder of the guardian that I had encountered. I never did, but the feeling of being watched, of being connected to something larger than myself, remained. I continued living my life, each day a reflection of the last, but with an added layer of awareness and gratitude for the unseen. The land, with its hidden stories and ancient spirits, had accepted me, and I, in turn, had learned to live in harmony with it. The memory of the creature, the horrifying moose encounter as I came to call it, served as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the wonders that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be discovered by those willing to see.